presentation is going to focus on getting started for your project, how to get started researching, that is, the creation of your research questions and the creation of a plan for your project. So initially, the thing to keep in mind is that your job is to get started writing, but before you can do that, you need to know your main objective for your department, for your individual board who will be grading your paper, and for your instructor. What are the specific requirements? What are their objectives? And how do they relate to yours and what they must be? And then the plan. What are your research questions going to be? And are you going to have a methods section that goes into primary research? That means, are you going to do your own research and what are the requirements of that? And then you're going to create an outline based on that. And everything you write as you get started, every piece of research information you write down has to have a goal to fill in that outline, to fill in those requirements, and to meet the objective of your department and instructor. The overall objective for anyone writing a research paper, however, is that it is clearly organized, academically written, and an example of your ability to not only perform the research, but to present that research. You must, therefore, create a sustainable argument that is persuasive, supportable, small scale enough to do in the amount of time that you have, and applicable to your departmental goals and your individual goals. We talked a little bit earlier about making sure it's relevant to you, but also that it meets the requirements of your department. You need to then develop your research questions. What is it you need to know in order to best examine and improve upon this issue or problem? What gap exists that you might fill? What questions do you need to answer to fill that gap? And what methods will you use to go about proving that your thesis is correct, or that that gap exists, or that more study is required? Some instructors require primary research on your part. That is, that you do an interview or create a survey of some kind. For some, that requirement doesn't exist, and you can just focus on a literature review where you're bringing in and analyzing the information of others. The important thing to know about the difference between these is your methods section will not have a data inclusion if you do not do the research yourself, and that's a mistake that we often see in the tutoring department. When you're developing your research questions, it's important that they're open-ended, meaning that they answer how and why. How is this going to serve your research? Why? Why is this important to study? And make sure that when you're developing those research questions, they're relevant to getting the answer to your thesis. Some things to consider as you're developing your research questions are population, who is affected and why, the problem, what is the cause, what is the effect, past phenomena, meaning when did the problem begin or how was it developed and how did that affect your thesis, or present phenomena, what is the current state of the problem, what solutions have been tried and to what effect. When you're developing these research questions, once you've considered those items, what questions will your research aim to answer? These are your research questions. What is the goal in putting all this literature together and reviewing it and analyzing it? What do you ultimately hope to find? Why are you doing primary research? What do you hope to gain from your data collection? What is it you're looking for? Your research questions must be relative to the problem that needs to be solved and something that will benefit from further examination. They must be able to be researched, and they must be measurable if you are doing primary research. You must have something that you can collect data and answer and determine, or that can be supported by your data or contradicted by it. As you're doing your research questions, and we had talked about mentoring in the last presentation, and we'll kind of stick with that theme, the idea of mentoring and what it can do as far as improving revenue and also retention for financial advisors. Our broader questions when we're researching. As you research, you want to write down everything. Everything that comes to mind will help you develop a more solid research question in the end. But in the beginning, you might have several and narrow it down to a few or combine them. In this case, that's what we did. So some broader questions for consideration. What is the turnover rate? How is the turnover rate affected by mentorship? What is the turnover rate for financial advisors in general? What turnover And how does it affect, what is turnover and how does it affect revenue? What is the percentage of revenue gained from financial advisors and banks? Those are all relatively general, and as you go through, you need to solidify those and bring them down to something, again, that is measurable. So how does the turnover rate for financial advisors relate to the existence of mentorship programs with financial institutions? You see, we've sort of combined the broader questions on the other side that were more general and turned them into something more specific to our thesis. And how does percentage of revenue gained from financial advisors and banks relate to time on the job? Again, you may have many questions when you start, but in the end, when you start to look at your data, what question can you really answer with your data? What did you start out trying to answer? What did you answer? And you can kind of solidify those as you go through.